Alright, so we're on four forces. This is the third time I've attempted to lecture on this topic. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is pitch around the lateral axis. And you're going lateral axis. So first we're going to talk about the lateral axis. So if here's an airplane, there's our pilot, and we have the horizontal stabilizer back here, but then connected to it we also have the elevator. So if this elevator goes up or down, that's going to make the nose go up or down. And if we had a wing out here, there's a wing, and we'll put the center of gravity right here. So does anybody want to try to remember what the center of gravity, what's key about the center of gravity right at this moment? If you're going to pitch the airplane, that is make the nose go up or down, and you were going to stick a pin inside the side of the airplane, and where it was going to rotate about where, it would rotate about the center of gravity. You could also argue that in this case, if the center of gravity is right there, and we put it on something to balance it right there, it would be perfectly balanced. The front half of here in front of this symbol right here. So this symbol right there is for the center of gravity. And commonly in aviation we call that the CG, because we're going to talk about it a lot, especially in other chapters. When we get into cross-country planning, we're figuring out how much weight we can put in the nose of the airplane or how much weight we can put in the back of the airplane. So it's going to pivot around the center of gravity. Yes? Have an extra copy of with me in class. See me at break time. So if you, just like if you had an insect collection and you stuffed a pin through the top of the insect and you spun it around that, then you would talk about that axis you were spinning. Here, it's like sticking the pin in from the side of the airplane, the way we're looking at it right now. And so that lateral axis is if you pitch the airplane nose up or nose down, it's around its lateral axis. So if the nose of the airplane goes up, that means the tail of the airplane is going to go down. And of course what that means is the elevator would have to look like this. So the air would hit it and it would push the tail down and the nose would go up. And where does it pivot? It pivots right there at the center of gravity. And this axis sticking out of the airplane is called the lateral axis. And, of course, I already said that the elevator is what controls it. Any questions about the lateral axis? What flight control you need to rotate about the lateral axis? Now, what is that called when the nose goes up and down? It's called pitch, changing pitch. Pitch the nose up, pitch the nose down. Okay, the longitudinal axis. Went too far. So let's look at the airplane, and we'll take a low wing airplane, and we'll put some landing gear on it, and we'll give this one a T-tail. And if we look right down the middle of that airplane, it's probably a little bit on the lower side, so I'm going to put the center of gravity right there. And if I move the aileron, say I moved this aileron to down, and I moved this aileron up, the airflow would hit this aileron and it would push the aileron, this wing up, and the airflow would hit that aileron and push that wing down. And so this wing would go up and this wing would go down and it would roll. And if I stuck a pin in this airplane, so if I drew that airplane like this, and I stuck this right there, that is the longitudinal longitudinal axis. So that like you stuck the pin in the very tail of the airplane and it came out the propeller. So if you were going to roll the airplane, you would use the ailerons. That would make one wing go up and another wing go down. Or if you wanted to get out of a roll and fly straight and level, you would use opposite aileron to bring the wings back up, and you've been doing that in the simulator. And while you're rolling, or when you roll, you're rolling about or around, or you're spinning around the longitudinal axis. Did I lose anybody there? So we got ailerons. So the vertical axis. We'll call this the rudder. And we'll put a propeller on it. And a wing. And we'll put a horizontal stabilizer on it. And we'll say that that center of gravity is right around there. So this one is like an insect where if you stuck the pin in the top of the insect. And if you move the rudder off to the left here, the airflow is going to hit it, and that's going to make the tail of the airplane, you're going to yaw, and the nose of the airplane is going to go in this direction. So in this case, you would yawing left, and this axis right there is the vertical axis. And another way to draw that is if I put the airplane like this. And here's the wing. That's the vertical axis. So if you wanted the airplane to rotate around the vertical axis, you would push on the rudder pedals. It would make the rudder move. The aircraft would yaw left or right around the center of gravity. So in theory, if you done this correctly, and you looked at all three in it, it would all be in the same place. You're just looking at it either from the top, from the back, or from the side. And that center of gravity would always be in the same place. And the center of gravity is usually just a little bit aft of the center of pressure on the wing. So let's see. So the question is, where is the center of pressure on a wing, Frederick? I'll give you a hint. If here's an airfoil, and here's the leading edge, and here's the trailing edge, so that means the air is coming like this. Can you tell me where is the center of pressure on this airfoil? Say that again. In the middle? You mean like exactly halfway between here and here? Like right there? If this distance and that distance were equal, the answer is no. Does anybody want to help Freddie Rick out? Jonathan? 1/3 from the trailing edge. No, that is correct. That is not correct. Brian, do you want to try? 1/3 from the leading edge. That is correct. Yeah, so if you had from this distance here to here, and you had that whole distance, and you start at the leading edge and you go back about 1/3, that is where the center of pressure is. And on airplanes, so in this airplane right there, about 1/3 of the way back would be right about here. And you'll notice the center of gravity is aft of that. So the center of gravity is going to be aft of that a little tiny bit. So, Freddie, you can redeem yourself. So you're flying along, and it's trimmed for straight and level flight. You don't have to hold your push or pull on the control wheel. You're flying along at 1,000 feet in a Piper Trauma Hawk. Have you ever been to a trauma center? Do you know what a trauma center is? Has anyone ever induced trauma upon you? So I'm the first instructor to do that. Trauma, it means like really, really hurt bad. Like you got in a car accident and your foot got cut off. That's traumatizing you. You're very, well, okay, so that's a nickname for a Piper Tomahawk, is a Piper Trauma Hawk. Okay, fine. You don't have to laugh. You don't even have to grin. But thanks, Brandon. You almost. So you fly along straight level in the Tomahawk. It's 1,000 feet. You've trimmed it so you don't have to push or pull on the control wheel. And you reach back and you pull the engine to idle all the way back to simulate that the engine has quit. If you aren't pushing on the control wheel or pulling it, will the nose airplane, what will happen to the pitch of the airplane? Will the pitch stay the same? Will the pitch go up? Will the pitch go down? There, you got 1 out of 3 chance. Go down, that's right. The nose of the airplane is going to go down. One of the reasons, in fact, the biggest reason, is that you're not getting lift at the center of pressure anymore. And the center of pressure is actually, you notice the center of pressure, it's in front of the center of gravity. It's been pushing. If this isn't there anymore, then this wing is going to tend to come down. That airplane is going to pitch down. So, the vertical axis goes up and down, straight up through the airplane. If you pushed in the rudder pedal, then you are the airplane and you are rotating along the vertical axis. Any questions, sir? All right, we got that one. All right, so straight level flight is nice and simple in that if we're going straight, here we'll have a really long airplane now with a really big propeller on it. Woohoo. Okay. In straight and level flight, so straight means no turns, and level means no climbs or descents. Okay, so we're not changing altitude. So not changing altitude. If that's the case, then the thrust and the drag are equal. Thrust equals drag, and our lift versus gravity are also equal. So nothing's changing. You're not speeding up, you're not slowing down, you're not climbing in altitude, you're not going down in altitude. The 4 forces are in equilibrium, or you could say the 4 forces are all canceling each other out, or actually a better way to say it is that thrust and drag are canceling each other out, and lift and gravity are canceling each other out, so there's no change. And in fact, unless you're doing maneuvers, let me put it this way, if you go on a cross-country flight in a small airplane in Central California, you take off out of Reedley International, going down to Meadows Field in Bakersfield, you're going to climb up to 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and you're going to level off, and the airplane's going to accelerate because you're not climbing. You're going to set the engine the way you want it. You're going to set the trim wheel the way you want it. You're going to make everything correctly, and you're going to whip out your Mountain Dew and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, it could be, diet Mountain Dew. I don't know. That's in any case. Maybe it's peanut butter and jam. Maybe like peanut butter and honey. I don't know. Oh, you don't have to. If there's no turbulence, the airplane's going to stay at the same altitude. It's not going to turn. And how much thrust is being produced by the engine and the propeller is equal to all of the drag on the airplane. And the lift being generated by the wings is equal to all of the gravity pulling down on it. And then you're going to just sit there and whistle. Although it is hard and difficult to whistle with peanut butter in your mouth. Has anybody ever whistled? It's very difficult to whistle with either of those two. Any questions on this? All right. So let's try an airplane. We'll try that same long airplane with an airfoil. Oh, that's pretty lousy airfoil. All right, so if all of these four, if thrust is equal to drag and lift is equal to gravity, we're going straight and level. Of course, the easiest thing to do is let's say we increase drag, we open a door. So drag is going to become greater. I know this is going to be really tough, so don't say it out loud, but think about it. If thrust stays the same and drag gets greater, what's going to happen to the airspeed of this aircraft? Is the airspeed going to stay the same? Is the airspeed going to slow down? Is the airspeed going to get faster? If we, let's say we open a door on either side. That way it won't yaw us one way or the other. Does anybody want to try? Make a guess. Drag is bigger and thrust did not change. Does the airplane go faster, slower, or stay the same? Anybody? It's going to slow down a little bit. And it's going to slow down to some amount. Now, if we let's just say for fun that we were doing 100 knots indicated airspeed. Knots indicated airspeed. Now we stick these things out here, and let's say that the airspeed slowly goes down to 80 knots indicated airspeed. At 80 knots indicated airspeed, these two doors may have the same drag, but the whole rest of the airplane has less drag now. So as we slow down to 80 knots, and it stays at 80 knots, that means that drag is less. And our thrust didn't change because we're producing the same amount of engine power. So generally what happens if you add drag, the airplane slows down some and then it stays there. Another way to do that is, oh wait, let's put the elevator up. The air's going to hit the elevator and get pushed up, so that means that the back of the tail of the airplane is going to go up and the nose of the airplane is going to pitch up. What's going to happen? Don't say it out loud. What's going to happen to the angle of attack on the wing if we pitch the nose up? What's going to happen to the angle of attack on the wing, Luis, if we pitch the nose up? Well, let's ask this question. Is the wing going to get more lift or less lift if you pull the nose up? More. That's right. It's going to get more. So, there's a lot of different ways to get more or less lift on the wing. Concerning angle of attack, what do you have to do on the angle of attack to get the wing to generate more lift? Do you go to a higher angle of attack or you go to a lower angle of attack? You got a 50-50 chance here. Higher, yes, that's correct. A higher angle of attack means you'll get more lift. But there's something that happens when you get more lift. Whenever you get more lift, you also get what? LX? Drag, that's right. Very good. So what's going to happen to the speed of the airplane? We're getting more lift. We're going to start climbing. But what's going to happen to the speed of the airplane? If we have more drag, the airplane's going to slow down. So literally, how about instead of in this scenario, let's open the doors to create more drag. Let's don't open the doors. Let's just increase the angle of attack on the wing by pitching the nose up. And there's more drag off of the wing. That slows us down to 80 knots. But we're climbing. And it's the opposite if we wanted to descend. So here we can climb without changing the thrust. Now, just so you know, in little tiny airplanes, they're so underpowered, if you're going to go into a climb, you're going to push the throttle all the way forward. Of course, if you climb and you level off at 700 or 800 feet, or correction, 7,000 or 8,000 feet, when you level off, you're just going to leave the throttle all the way forward. So if you wanted to go to 9,000 feet and change your mind, you'd reach up and push the throttle forward, but it wouldn't move because it's already all the way forward. So let's go back to being 800. Let's go back to being at 80 knots. And let's say we're going straight and level. I don't think I can go back. All right, I'm going to have to just draw in another airplane there. So here's our horizontal stabilizer, and here's the elevator. Let's say we move the elevator like this. Now air's going to hit the elevator, and the air's going to bounce off, so that's going to push the elevator up. If the tail of the airplane goes up, the nose of the airplane is going to go down. So now we're going to pitch down. And we don't touch the throttle, so we leave the thrust the same. I know this one's going to be really hard. But if we were cruising along at 100 knots, what's going to happen to the airspeed if we don't touch the throttle and all we do is just push down on the control wheel? What's going to happen to the airspeed, Jonathan? It's going to increase, yes. So we're going to end up going faster. So instead of 100 knots, instead of going 100 knots, maybe we're going to go 120 knots. So the question becomes, though, why do we, at some point, we're going to stop going faster and we're going to sit there at 100 knots? It's because the drag on the airplane gets bigger. And that counteracts the fact that gravity's pulling us down. Again, we can trim it. We can trim it to stay going 120 knots going down. We can trim the nose wheel and just sit there and go back to eating our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So whether we're climbing or descending, most of the time during the climb and during the descent, your power doesn't change. When it can change is usually you're flying along and you go, oh, I want to climb. You're going to push the throttle forward and give it a lot of extra thrust. And at the same time, you're going to pull the nose up. If you're flying straight and level and you want to descend, you really have two choices. Do I want to stay descending at 100 knots? I would have to pull the throttle back a little bit. But we're pilots and we want to go fast. That's why we fly planes, right? So if we don't have to pull the throttle back, we just push the nose down and go 120 knots. So does anybody remember, in a rental aircraft, you're out somewhere at a flight school and you're renting the airplane. How you pay for it? When do you start paying for renting an airplane, Jonathan? There's a little meter in there, and it's hooked into the engine oil pressure. So as soon as the oil pressure comes, and it's question. It's called a hop. Some people call it the time meter. The first ones to get invented were invented by a company name. Actually, you know the author of Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. It was that cartoonist. It was his great grandfather. His last name was Hobbes, and he invented the Hobbes meter. Everyone thinks that's a true story, huh? Okay, good. Yeah, that was a true story. Huh? I do not know the answer to that question. So here's the question, and many of you won't know the answer, so I'm just going to let anybody answer, is when you're flying along in the airplane, if you have the throttle pulled back to idle and you're only burning 1 gallon an hour, or you got the throttle pushed all the way forward and you're burning 7 gallons an hour, how much rental company? The same amount, that's right. Most little airplanes are rented wet. If you rent it wet, that means you pay $100 an hour, even if you're sitting in there on the ground and it's idling and you're only burning 1 gallon for an hour. Or if you're at cruise, burning 6 gallons an hour, doing 100 miles an hour. Or if you push the nose down and you still burn 6 gallons an hour, but now you're going 120. So if you're renting the airplane and you're descending, do you want to go 100 knots or you want to go 120 knots? You want to go 120 knots. The only time that becomes an issue is when you get into a bigger and bigger airplane. There's an airspeed limit. There's actually a speed limit in the United States in the air. And below 10,000 feet, knots indicated air. So you're going to write that down. If you're below 10,000 feet, the speed limit is 250 knots, K-I-A-S, K-I-A-S. The speed, good question. What about the sound barrier? Above 10,000 feet, the speed limit in the United States is don't make a sonic boom. You can't go supersonic. So if you're near a big giant airport like Fresno or Los Angeles International, when the jets take off, let's back up a little bit. In a tomahawk, the best rate of climb speed is 70 knots indicated to the highest altitude for the least amount of time. It's 250 indicated airspeed, K-I-A-S. It's 250. And now in a little tiny airplane, you never even think about it, because by the time the airplane went 250 knots indicated, the wings would have broken off. So you're not going to do that. But if you're flying a jet like an airliner or a business jet, that airplane will go faster than 250 knots at sea level. So literally, when those jets take off, they actually set the power they want for climb, and then they actually pull the nose up to go slow, to not go faster than 250 knots indicated. Their best rate of climb might be 280 knots indicated, but they pull the nose up so it'll only go 250 knots indicated because of the speed limit below 10,000 feet. Then when they hit 10,000 feet, then they push the nose forward to 280, and they actually climb faster. For every airplane, there's going to be one airspeed where you climb the fastest and how much altitude per minute, and that's very close to a thing called the best lift over drag, and in a Tomahawk, that's 70 miles an hour. Interestingly enough, that's also very close to your best glide speed, which in the Tomahawk, oh wait, awesome, is also 70 miles an hour. Yeah, so that's a fun airspeed, John. The FAA doesn't want you to go faster than 250 knots indicated when you're below 10,000 feet. And just so you know, that's 10,000 feet MSL, not 10,000 feet AGL. So if you take off out of Leadville, Colorado, and it's at 9,900 feet, you climb 100 feet off the ground, you can go past 250 indicated. And the reason is, so you're more likely to be able to see other airplanes and avoid them. If everybody's flying around at 500 miles an hour, your oncoming speed to the other airplane is a head-on of 1,000 miles an hour. But if each of you is only going 250, then your head-on collision speed is only 500 miles an hour. Correction, knots indicated. So in theory, you have more time to see the other airplane. So does anybody have any questions about climbing and descending? Okay, we're going to call that quits for today. Did I hear a oh yes out there? That's all right. That's all right. So just to recap, the draft essay, which I'm going to go print some right now, is due on, does anybody remember? October 19th. I wrote it on the second page of my syllabus. I wrote it on the second page of my syllabus. I went to the October 19th